Where did the idea that witches fly on broomsticks originate? Historian Michael D. Bailey explores witchcraft down the ages and why people believed that witches could fly. The image of a witch flying on a broomstick is iconic, but it's not nearly as old as the idea of witchcraft itself, which dates to the early days of humankind. Several theologians, church inquisitors, secular magistrates, and other authorities first wrote about such flight in the early 1400s. The earliest known visual depiction of flying witches appears in a 1451 manuscript copy of one such text, Le Champion des Dames, the Defender of Ladies, by the French poet Martin Lefranc. Witchcraft accusations at this time were increasingly focused on women. The clothing of the figures in Lefranc's text depicts them as coming from a non-elite ranks of medieval society. So do the implements on which they fly. Staffs and brooms were tools of ordinary housework. The notion that witches could fly served to support the idea that they gathered in large groups called Sabbaths, and these gatherings in turn heightened the supposed threat witches posed on Christian society. Even after the idea of witches flying on brooms was introduced to European society, it was not readily accepted. Many who wrote about witchcraft at the time, including Lefranc, were quite skeptical about the reality of flying witches. And as it turned out, however, authorities could still perceive a threat even if they believed witches' flight was imaginary. The scope of skepticism. In my work as a scholar, the writer says, of medieval European history, I have researched texts describing witchcraft in the early 1400s. Some texts fully accepted the idea that witches flew, often on brooms or staffs. One described witches traveling to Sabbaths on staffs anointed with a magical ointment and flying into the mountains to gather ice to cause hailstorms. Other texts, however, were not sure that such flight was real. One noted that accused witches claimed to fly from mountaintop to mountaintop on chairs, but it was also hinted that demons might have tricked them into thinking they did. Another text stated that accused witches who claimed to fly were deluded by the devil. Skepticism about flying witches drew on the early 10th century church law about women who claimed to ride at night on certain beasts, quote-unquote, in the train of the pagan goddess Diana, whom Christian authorities understood to be a demon in disguise. The law declared that such flight was not real, and anyone who thought so had been seduced by illusions and phantasms of demons. It prescribed no direct punishment, but mandated preach against such infidels. Skeptics of magical flight were quite specific in their doubts. Lefranc, for example, declared that anyone who thought that witches could fly lacked common sense. On the other hand, he fully accepted that magicians, who were generally male, could conjure demons and that magic arts had been practiced as far back as ancient Persia. The story, however, is not so simple, as male authorities accepted the reality of magic practiced by men, but doubted that women flew on brooms. These same authorities were, in general, taking other aspects of witchcraft more seriously. Imagining flight? Did women accused of witchcraft really insist that they flew on brooms? Scholars have speculated that the ointments often mentioned in accounts of such flight might have functioned as hallucinogens, produced sensations of flying. The most thorough study of these accounts, however, finds that such references rarely appear in voluntary testimony. They come instead from authorities recording and often reshaping what accused witches said. And in the end, allegations of flight and dismissal of its reality may have sprung entirely from the minds of legal and religious authorities who codified and condemned the idea of witchcraft. Their skepticism hardly mattered. Courts could execute convicted witches regardless of whether they believed they could fly. Although witch hunting ended, at least in Europe and North America in the 18th century, the image of witches flying on brooms endures. And this is by Michael D. Bailey, Professor of History, Iowa State University. The article republished from the Conversation under Creative Commons and this is on Unexplained Mysteries. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.